Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling like a puppet whose strings have been tangled around your heart, your thoughts, your very sense of who you are? You replay their words over and over, trying to catch the moment when things slipped away, when their quiet assurances turned into whispered instructions on how to doubt yourself. Emotional manipulation doesn't announce itself in flashing lights or raised voices. Instead, it tiptoes in on velvet slippers, cloaked in concern and compassion, until one day you wake up wondering if you remember what joy feels like. It starts with a compliment delivered a little too intensely, a flood of praise that almost leaves you breathless. You bask in that glow for a moment, feeling seen, feeling valued. And then the withdrawal. The warmth disappears as quickly as it arrived, leaving you cold and desperate, hungry for their approval once more. That pull, that dance of affection and absence, teaches you to tie your worth to their changing moods. You begin to question every spark of joy within yourself. Was it real, or merely a trick of the light they cast? Then there's the guilt that arrives on silent wings. They remind you of every kindness you've shown, every sacrifice you've made, as though you owe them an unpayable debt. In their stories, you're the one who has taken too much, who has failed to appreciate their generosity. You find yourself apologizing for emotions that feel entirely authentic. Sadness when they ignore your calls, frustration when they rewrite conversations you thought you shared. Your empathy becomes a weapon turned inward, slicing away at your confidence until you believe you deserve the misery they dispense. Behind closed doors, their concern often wears the mask of logic. They will carefully dismantle your worries, piece by piece, until what remains seems so trivial, you must feel foolish for caring. "I'm only being practical," they say. Yet beneath that rationale lies a strategy to align your perceptions with theirs. You start leaning on their judgments, trusting their version of events, more than the flicker of intuition in your own mind. Slowly, you forget how to trust your instincts altogether. You might notice your voice catching in your throat whenever you try to share a disagreement. Once, you would have argued passionately, but now the thought of clashing creates a knot in your chest. You tiptoe around subjects that once ignited exciting debates, because every conflict threatens the fragile peace you've been taught to prioritize. When someone dangles the threat of emotional withdrawal, a cold shoulder, a silent treatment, you scramble to rebuild that connection, even if it costs you pieces of your own truth. The most insidious form of manipulation may be the one that convinces you that your memory is unreliable. A misplaced item becomes your fault because you always lose things. A conversation you clearly remember shifts shape until it seems like your recollection must be flawed. You start taking notes, recording messages, desperate for proof that your mind isn't betraying you. Even then, the doubt lingers, seeping into every corner of your awareness until you wonder if reality itself has been edited around you. As your world narrows, you begin to wear a borrowed identity, an illusion crafted by someone who insists they know what's best for you. You learn to swallow criticisms that contradict your values, simply to avoid triggering their displeasure. You pick the meals they'd prefer, watch the movies they'd recommend, tailor your laughter to their sense of humor. And the version beneath those concessions starts to fade, like ink washed away by a relentless tide. You may catch glimpses of your true self, a flash of childhood boldness, or a memory of dreams you once carried. But those moments feel distant, almost like a story that belongs to someone else. When confusion settles in, it drapes itself over your thoughts like a heavy blanket. Logical inconsistencies swirl around you until you can no longer distinguish between genuine care and strategic kindness. You catch yourself thinking that maybe you are too sensitive, too needy, too dramatic. Every plea for honesty from your own heart is met with the echo of their voice, telling you it's not that serious, that you're blowing things out of proportion. And so the cycle repeats, wrapping you tighter in threads of self-doubt. Yet in the midst of this fog, there is a spark, a tremor of recognition that insists you deserve better. It might come as a sharp pang of anxiety before a conversation you know will end in silence, or a moment of stillness when you realize you can't bear the thought of another apology for feelings you have every right to hold. That flicker is your deeper self sending up a flare, signaling that the person you see in the mirror isn't wholly yours, that there are parts of you neglected, silenced, waiting to be rediscovered. Breaking free means learning to notice the rhythm of manipulation, seeing how those subtle patterns repeat like an old song on endless loop. You begin to question whether that pang in your chest is the echo of their moods or the steady beat of your own truth. You start to pause before you explain away their behavior with stories about stress or past hardships, and you ask instead how their actions land in your body. You give voice to the tension in your shoulders, the flutter in your stomach, rather than instantly categorizing them as problems you must solve. Reclaiming your identity feels like rummaging through an attic you once called home but now barely recognize. You dust off passions long abandoned, the notebooks filled with plans you never finished, the photographs capturing a smile you scarcely see anymore. With each reclaimed interest, each hesitant but honest statement of preference, you feel the walls of that borrowed house beginning to crack. Your world shifts from a staged play to unscripted reality. Trusting yourself again requires practice, patience, and witnesses who affirm your experience without twisting it to fit their narrative. Friends who listen when you say you're hurt, without pointing out how you've hurt them in the past. A mirror that reflects not your altered reflection, but the contours of your authentic self. Journals where your words grow into silent protest against the lies you were made to believe, and slowly you begin to feel the weight lift off your chest. Decisions no longer hinge on their approval. Your boundaries stand firm, guarding the sacred spaces where your true self dwells. You discover that discomfort can be a compass pointing toward what really matters to you, not a signal that you've gone astray. When you do speak up, even if your voice shakes, you reinforce the truth that you have the right to occupy space, to express desires unfiltered by fear. Turning your awareness into action often means distancing yourself from the toxic harmony they demand. It could look like setting clear limits on conversations that spiral into guilt trips, or choosing to step away entirely if the manipulation persists. You learn that self-protection is not selfish, but vital. You begin to treat yourself with the same kindness you once gave them, replacing their criticisms with affirmations of your intrinsic worth. Each step forward solidifies the foundation beneath you. You're no longer the person waiting for their moods to shift. You're a self guided by values you've written down, revisited whenever uncertainty creeps in. You honor the signals your body sends, trusting that tightness in your chest is a valid red flag. You recognize that hope, though powerful, must be paired with clear-eyed assessment of patterns, rather than a wishful glance at what could be. This reclamation is not a sprint, but a lifelong journey of self-discovery. Some days you'll feel fierce and unshakable. Other days, echoes of doubt may still whisper. But each time you pause, notice, and realign yourself with your truth, you make it just a little bit harder for manipulation to find purchase. You reclaim not just a voice, but the conviction that your reality belongs to you alone. In the end, the story of emotional manipulation is not one of victimhood, but of resilience. It's about the power to untangle the knots that bind you and find your way back to a self-defined on your own terms. You emerge not just free, but whole, holding your own narrative in your hands at last. And in that space, no whisper of control can ever drown out the song of your authentic self again.